All right, what is going on, everybody? It's your boy Big Dave Martell back with the BOG. The BOG returns, and I'm sorry I didn't have the introduction video. I can't find it anywhere, and I just did not have time to cook up a new one. So unfortunately, we just had to just come in guns a-blazing. But that's okay. We'll put one in post-production because what's going on here is this going to be live. We're doing this live, but it's being recorded, and it is going to be featured on Hearth Fire Radio, which is a network that is coming very, very soon. It's going to feature all kinds of great pagan and heathen content for you, the people, for the folk out there. You guys are going to be able to go on there and find so many great shows from so many great acts, and you're not even going to, I can't even reveal who's going to be on it. You guys are going to love it. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be like, I don't know, what's Spotify? It's gonna be like folk Spotify. You guys are gonna love it. So, I guess I'll leave it up maybe for a day or something, and then we'll take it down, and you will not be able to access this episode and all the back BOG episodes until Hearthfire Radio comes back up, because I'm sure many of you have noticed that the BOG is not available on YouTube anymore. And very soon, I forgot about Odyssey. Odyssey has it all backed up. It's going to be coming down off of Odyssey, and it's going to be available over there on Hearthfire Radio for everybody to go check out and everything like that. So, yeah. So Hearthfire Radio is coming very, very soon. Lots of great content's going to be available on it. Star-studded lineup from everybody, all your favorite dudes in the sphere, in the scene, all your great, spiritual, folkish, heathen content creators and stuff like that. So all that good stuff, that's going to be where the BOG, that's where the BOG's going to call home for the foreseeable future. And then here on the Dave Martell YouTube channel, I don't know what I'm going to do with this thing. I think I'm like real shadow banned. So I don't know what I want to do. I don't know if I should like start a new YouTube channel and do something else. Folks have been asking for the Bizarre Cast to come back. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm having fun writing books and doing my thing, doing music and working on the things that I'm doing. But I got to get back on the mic. Because this is an important thing. This is where my bread and butter, and this is where I started. This is home base for me. So I got to get back on the mic, and we got to do it regularly. But the BOG is coming back regularly, and you will be able to find it over at Hearthfire Radio, which is going to be it's a project started by me and Mr. Mike. The Culture Dads are starting this up. So guys, keep your eyes peeled. You're going to love it. It's going to be subscription based, but you'll be able to just get all of your favorite content creators, all of your favorite thinkers and speakers, and everybody is going to be just shot right into one place. It's going to be like a bundle deal. It's going to be great. You're going to love it. It's going to be off the charts. So other than that, guys, just go buy books. I got books for sale over at thebizarchives.com. We got a sale going on right now. I gotta update. We got some fresh inventory, so I gotta update some of the inventory on those books. So guys, go over there, buy books. We got a big release coming with all that stuff. So stay fresh, stay frosty, keep your eyes peeled. Lots of great stuff. Go check that out at thebizarchives.com. So it's been a while. It's been quite a while since we've done the BOG. We did a little bit of a hiatus. We ran out of steam a little bit on the BOG. We kind of ran the course and kind of covered a lot of the topics that we wanted to cover. And now we're back. We took a little bit of break, and now we're back, and we're stronger than ever. And very, very soon we're gonna be updating everything, upgrading all of our production quality. We got a lot of ideas in the mix. We got a lot of stuff. We got a big vision and all that kind of stuff. But Andre and Tristan, how we doing, man? We haven't been on the horn for a while.
Yeah, I'm very glad to be back, Dave, but it's certainly been a while.
It's definitely good to be back on the BOG right now.
Feels good. It feels like I like, like sometimes you'll have like a jacket or something that's like real dope, and like you wear it for a long time, and you put it in the closet, and you're like, maybe. Then you get a new coat, and then you're going through your closet a couple years later, and you're like, man, this. Why did I put this away? This thing was dope, and you bring it back out. That's what I feel right now. That's how I'm feeling right now. But today we're going to talk about something that is a question that gets asked quite a bit. And we're going to talk about how we know the gods are real? How do we know that there are gods? This is something that we get asked a lot. This is something I get asked a lot. This is something that people struggle with in their faith, and that's okay. You know, to be a person of faith in modernity, not even just us, to be anybody in modernity to try to hold faith is tough. Modernity is literally just built, it's constructed to be anti-faith. Just about everybody you meet, very few people, Tristan says this all the time, that very few people walking around today are meaningfully religious. It's just the fact of the matter. You know, we get online and there's a lot of like people that are really, I don't know if the fanatical is the word, people that are really have their hearts in their religion. Everybody's seen the Christian versus pagan debates online and how we viciously fight all the time. But the truth of the matter is that like 99.99% of churches you walk into, you find just half-assed people that kind of make up their own beliefs. You go to a pagan festival, except for like some of ours. If you go to like Pagan Pride Day or whatever the hell kind of, you know, normie garbage they have, or go to we believe it, you know, blah blah blah. You go to those kind of Facebook groups, you find a bunch of just fair weather LARPy people that just kind of make their own crap up and don't even like really meaningfully believe anything. Nobody meaningfully believes anything, in my opinion, in modernity. It goes beyond religion. These people, I describe them as mushy. People are just freaking mushy, right? They don't stand for anything. They don't have any convictions. And there's even kind of this connotation around people that do believe in something. You have a conversation with these people and you say something sternly and strongly, passionately, they're like, okay, like you're a piece of crap for having something that you are passionate about or you believe in, or you have this also goes into like, say there's something that you have deep knowledge on, something that's a part of interest. I hear this all the time, or I used to hear this all the time when I was out and about in Normoid world, when I was with the Volha so much, is they would say this, and this would drive me nuts. Why do you know that? Why do you know that? Not how do you know that? How did you come into this idea? It's why. Like it's a problem. Like it's superfluous to know things, to be an interesting person. Is this superfluous like waste of energy or something like that? It makes no sense. Tristan, you know what I'm saying here?
I know exactly what you're saying, Dave. It's the perennial question of what you're reading for.
Yeah. And, you know, I hate dunking on Zoomers because it's, you know, I feel that it's low hanging fruit and there are a lot of great Gen Z guys out there. I know them. But as a mass, as a whole, they are the mushiest of generations so far. Like nihilism is their go-to. They're so ironic and like they're just like, there's been times when I was at my old job, most of the people I was working with were Gen Z people. And I remember I would like say something and that I felt some kind of way about. Like, you know, say it from your chest. I said it from this ain't right. Something like that. And they do this thing where they just like get quiet and give you this like blank stare. Like they all turn into, there's like memes about it. They call it the fluoride stare, the Zoomer fluoride stare. And that would just drive me nuts. It's like, what? You guys don't have any. You guys are just dickless. You're spineless. Like this is just jellyfish shit, mushy nihilist crap. And I hate it. I respect people that, even if somebody I'm opposed to, there's been times face to face, I've had like pretty heated arguments with like other Christians, right? With different types of religions. And like, I can say like, yeah, I don't agree with you. We're not, we don't come to terms here, but I respect that this is what you believe and you believe it. You know, I mean, I respect that you have that strength in you to have that faith. I respect that, right?
But I've had that argument many times myself with various religious people, even especially some of my Hindu friends who take an approach that I would consider to be incorrect, but I recognize that their position is that way because it's so structurally impossible to get away from their religious doctrine in that. And I always tell them the same thing, is that, well, I don't agree with you, but I would at least respect the fact that you're being dogmatically religious. It's appropriate for the religion.
Yeah. It's Andre, is this like an American thing, or do you guys have that in Scandinavia? Is that like just a worldwide thing?
It's definitely far worse in Scandinavia, I would argue,
Really?
because it's
Really?
especially when we're talking about religion, that is met with sneers and jeers. Like being religious is almost synonymous with being well, you're stupid. You believe in a fairy tale. Why would you believe in that? It's automatically assumed that you don't talk about religion, and if you do and say that you're religious, people will just automatically assume that you're slow or something like that. And if
Mhm.
you are religious, you kind of have to emphasize the fact that, oh no, I don't actually believe in God or gods as real or anything like that. It's more of a concept. It's more of an idea, if anything else. That's as far as you're allowed to go. Statistically speaking, Scandinavia, I think, alongside the Baltic countries, are seen as the most godless people on earth, and that's a dubious honor to have.
Ooh. You know, I can definitely see that because there are a lot of I've ran into on social media Scandinavian heathens that are just like it's and I'm not beating them up. You know, I got love for our folk all over the world, but they definitely have they're less comfortable to I don't know what the word is for it. Tristan, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they're less able to conceptualize of the gods as like personable, actually real identities. They tend to favor something like a natural explanation, like Thor is just representative of lightning, or they do like a Jungian archetype kind of thing. Basically, anything to rationalize away the actual rigor of there being an actual deity.
Andre, you had something you wanted to say?
No, I would say that's pretty much accurate. There is also a very non-confrontational element in Scandinavians that do not allow them to have the same sort of fanatic zeal that Americans tend to have when it comes to religion of all sorts.
I mean,
So
it's
they
worth
tend to back
no,
down.
I would say it's worth noting that just as a cross-cultural comparison, although it's very common in America to like casually discuss religion, like people open up with like, so what church do you go to? Whereas in a lot of Europe and especially Scandinavia, people don't talk about religion at all. It's just considered incredibly rude to even broach the topic.
Really?
Oh yeah, that is generally accepted that you don't talk about religion because it will lead to disagreements or fights. And this is especially true in the Protestant nations.
Hmm. That's super strange because America is very, very Protestant. And you guys know me, I am the first guy to levy harsh critiques against cultural Protestantism and the baggage that gets left over from cultural Protestantism and stuff like that. But one thing with American Protestantism and honestly, American religiosity in general, and maybe this is kind of in the Anglo sphere because I think Brits also Brits are a little bit more secularized than we are, but one thing that got left over is just the like priors of religiosity. So I think that Americans, uh, just in recent memory, were very religious. Like for example, my grandparents were very, very religious. You know, I mean, like devoutly religious. It wasn't really until my parents' generation that they like the boomers and the Gen Xers did things start getting a little bit more wishy washy. But even then, in the '80s, you had freaking and these aren't like good people. These aren't our friends, but you get like the church ladies of the 1980s that like had the satanic panic and all. And there's some truth to the satanic panic. That's a real thing. We should do a show about that actually. But um that was still there. That's still like the remnants of that is still there. And depending on where you go, there are you go to the Bible Belt, that shit is religious as hell. They are still very religious there. And while they're not necessarily our friends, but people that come out of that and come into heathenry tend to have an easier time just accepting divinity as a whole. They come to heathenry and they don't have the baggage of secularism and atheism and materialism, which I think are far more pernicious than some, if you leave a Christian sect or if you leave I don't know, some sort of Eastern religion or something. If you come from religion to another religion, you don't have necessarily, you have some of it because of modernity. But I think that the baggage that we have. Some of it is bad, obviously. A lot of it is bad, but some of it is good. Just assuming divinity is real. Unfortunately, for many folks, they don't have those priors, especially younger guys that grew up with parents that were not religious at all, and grew up in a society that was not religious at all. And Tristan and Andre are right. There are times that I've been out in public. I've for example, if I go to the gym and I'm in the steam room and I'm hanging out there and somebody sees my Mjolnir, they want to talk about it. Like, yo, do you believe that, or is that something? What is that? And they're just curious. Even people that are different. One time I had a pretty cool conversation with a Hispanic guy. He's a Catholic, but he just wanted to ask me questions about it. He was just fascinated by it. And he's just like, oh, how do you understand this? What do you believe about that? And blah, blah, blah. And he was just fascinated by it. So it's very easy for us in the United States to have casual conversations about religion and to do this kind of stuff. But when you grow up, maybe if you're a younger person or from a country that is very, very heavily secularized for many generations, for example, our friend, the Golden One, he has this position that he just doesn't know because he grew up in Sweden. And I don't know if all Sweden is like this. I've never been to Sweden, but I have heard that Sweden has been very, very secular for many generations, and religion is just completely alien to them at this point. So what we're going to talk about today is for folks that are coming from that. How do we logically understand and come into faith? Because as I said before, faith is very, very hard to, even for the faithful, faith is hard to maintain because you have the world against you at this time. And while Christians have a lot of really good arguments for this, to justify to themselves and justify to each other, apologetics, I guess you could say, about how they can prove that their deities are real, we have not. We talk about it, but we don't have these things codified. It's not something like you can't really go to your standard heathen organization and be like, how do we know the gods are real? And hear kind of these already established arguments to appeal to our logic as to why the gods are real. And this is very important. I know I beat up on, it's a whole thing, but it's important for us to be able to have every weapon that we need in our quiver, in our armory, to be able to combat any sort of thing that modernity throws at us, and to come into faith, pure, real, true faith. Because without real, true, pure faith, believing in divinity, it's not real, right? How are we going to live an actual breathing, alive tradition? How are we supposed to revitalize this beautiful religious tradition if we don't actually believe? So this episode is not necessarily just to make an argument for people that are coming in and trying to come to terms with understanding that divinity is real, but also for ourselves when we do have crises of faith. That's something that people have, say you get caught up in work for a long time, you get stuck, you don't really get to practice your devotions, or maybe some bad stuff happens to you. This isn't, this happens, right? Say you have some horrible tragedy that happens in your family. This is a time where crisis of faith can happen. So what we want to talk about in this episode today is we want to go into the arguments and the philosophical justifications that prove that the gods indeed are real. And there's a few different arguments that we can make, right? And we're going to go through them. And Tristan actually has these things laid out pretty thoroughly. So I'm just going to pass it off to him and let him go.
Right. So I would like to start by saying that I think you hit the nail on the head, Dave, that a lot of the main argument here is that most people in today's age, even if they come from a religious background, it's often a half-endorsed religious background. Deeply within their soul, they accept the basic tenets and arguments of a sort of naturalistic, materialistic paradigm, so of a quasi-atheism, right? They want everything to be amenable to science, to logic and rationality, quote unquote. And when they struggle with ideas that are faith-centric. They ask you, how can you really believe that there is a God who lives in the sky, that sort of thing. So in order to help these people, I've set up some of these philosophical arguments so that we can show logically and rationally why we know through philosophical evidence that there must be some sort of deity. So we're going to start with a brief overview of how we know philosophically that there must be a deity, and thus we can prove that atheism, and by extension materialist thinking, is incorrect. There are several distinct arguments, but we're going to start with the first one, which is called the cosmological argument. The cosmological argument posits the simple issue that nothing can come from nothing, and that being as there was something, we must accept that there has been something that was in some condition responsible for its creation. That sounds very confusing, I know. So let me just parse through that a little bit. Basically, if there is an idea that, let's say, the Big Bang, right? Everyone understands the Big Bang. There was just a little tiny mode of energy, and then it exploded, and that created everything, more or less. The cosmological argument posits the question of, okay, where did that first little bit of matter actually come from? At some point, when you go all the way back, you have an issue where this thing needs to come from something. Something needs to be responsible for it. You can't just accept that nothing. It came from out of nowhere. It was always there. This is illogical, irrational. So because of this issue, we know that there must be some sort of deity, something that exists without and beyond the plane of material matter, because there's nothing else that can actually reasonably solve this sort of conundrum. It has to be some sort of supernatural force that is beyond matter itself. Not answering this question puts us in a position in which the existence of a deity fulfills the role of Occam's razor. That is, however unlikely you think the answer that it must be some sort of supernatural force, it must be true if there is no other reasonable explanation. Even though you think it's really unlikely, it must actually be the truth. The inability to answer this question and still believe otherwise constitutes what is effectively a leap of faith or some sort of stubborn delusion that someone won't actually meaningfully move against, even though it's completely irrational.
Yeah, I would also like to add. This is something that you point out quite a bit. One of the most pernicious parts of liberalism and the modern worldview is that it sort of paints itself as this is just how things are, right? This is just how it is, right? You know, appealing to logic, secularism, blah, 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 blah. This is just the base standard of truth. When in actuality, you have to choose to believe that, right? So one thing that these people will do is, in order to, when you get into it like an argument with them, they will start with the basis of you have to appeal to rationalism, right? What do you think about that, Tris?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of this, it actually goes much deeper, because what they mean by rationalism is often a sort of a pseudo understanding, like a propagandistic understanding of what the term even means. Their idea of what rationalism is basically just scientism. They mean to say that. And when you explain to them what scientism actually is, you often find this conundrum where they basically just, like, they can't move forward from it, because that is actually what they believe. And they don't want, like, they have this sort of cognitive dissonance where they don't want to accept that scientism is an epistemological error. They refuse to believe that, because they can't actually, you know, they can't bring themselves to say, yeah, I guess I was wrong, because this is what I believe.
Yeah, because if they come to that conclusion that this one thing is wrong, their whole entire worldview just
right.
explodes.
After that point, it completely collapses. They have no idea what to base anything on.
Yeah, so they literally can't. Like, they're just they can't. Their entire internal framework, everything that they use to understand reality falls apart the moment that they can't, that you point out that process in and of itself is flawed, and it's just not correct, right? Scientism is just so pernicious. That is the new world religion. At times, there are so many times when I'm talking to my kinsmen, when I'm talking in a religious context, when I put on the the Dave Heathen hat and I talk about this stuff, it even people that I know that are like, so what would be the scientific explanation for that? Right? They even people that I know that are true, that really believe, have these priors, have these presuppositions, and it's really tough because you have to go in and reprogram people, and the people need to work on reprogramming themselves. Right? They have to change the whole operating system, and a lot of times I say that some of you folks, some folks out there, you have to identify that you can't change your operating system, and you just have to know that your operating system is wrong and teach the correct one to your children. We just have to chew on it and power through and give it to our children, because they can identify that it is wrong, and that the folk worldview is right and good and correct, but they themselves have so much trouble. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? And there's only a certain amount of people that can relearn these things, and that it requires a lot of bravery to admit this to yourself. So many people will cope, and they will wear a disguise. They will wear a costume of, I'm not actually like this, when instead of admitting that they are. Right? Tristan, you know where I'm going with this, or am I rambling a little bit?
No, I mean, I think you're accurate there. In fact, I would say a lot of the time the people who present themselves as not being like that are often the people who are most enthralled in any sort of a priori thinking based on liberal ideals. And this comes about when you actually start questioning them or giving them examples of like the actual traditional heathen worldview. Suddenly they don't like that anymore.
Oh yeah. So let's boil down the cosmological argument real quick before we move on. So the cosmological argument is effectively, as Tristan said, we can look around and see there is somethingness, right? We can look around and see that reality is real. We can look around and see things, right? At one point, there were no things. So something must have happened to make things. We can't how can I?
Well, it's a prime mover argument. So eventually there needs to be the prime mover, the source of all things, right? So even if you're, if you're religious, you might say that's a god, but if you're a materialist, an atheist, or a scientist, you might say that this is some sort of natural process, like a mote of, mote of energy, or a spark of matter in the void somewhere or something. But it doesn't really matter so long as this is the ultimate. As far as you go back, this is the prime mover. There's nothing before that. There is no cause before that.
Yeah. And although and I point this out when I'm teaching this stuff, is we are not to use science as a way to justify. However, a lot of times, actually almost most of the time, that which we find in the Edda, the teachings of the heathen worldview, do coincide with science. Like, science figured out what we already knew. And one of the examples is, in Voluspo, right? The creation of the universe. There was Gununga Gap, which was the holy void, the sacred void, and then fire and ice, entropy and negentropy. Some people would say matter and antimatter, whatever it is, came together, clashed, and exploded and created all things. It literally explains the Big Bang.
Yeah, Andre, what do you think about this?
No, I think honestly the arguments that have been laid out here, that people's worldview tend to kind of fall apart when actually encountering the cosmological argument, it usually boils down to connecting it back to what Dave said about the Big Bang, is that a lot of people want to fall back on the Big Bang as an explanation for things, and then they say that would be the cause of everything. And we know that the Big Bang, or at least the current theories, is that the Big Bang were created by an initial burst of energy or matter. And they say that this would explain it. So obviously there's no need for some sort of divine explanation. But what they've actually in reality done about this is when they are trying to explain, like, oh yeah, the universe was created by the Big Bang, they have just moved the goalpost, because initially when they say the energy that created the universe, that must have been the beginning. So where did that energy come from? Well, obviously that must have come from something else. So you have a wide variety of explanations. Some of them are absolutely horrendously far-fetched, such as them coming from another universe that once existed before ours. But that doesn't really matter, because what you're asking for, what you're looking for, is the very beginning, the very first moment where everything began, essentially. It doesn't matter how many universes you have gone through in that case. Where is the start? And I think that's where the cosmological argument really starts to shine.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that is basically its essence. Once you get to that ultimate matter of this is where everything starts, we need to figure out where exactly this comes from. And
You can't keep moving the goalpost, essentially. You have to
right,
find out where the goalpost came from.
yeah, exactly that. Eventually, you can't move the goalpost enough. You have to actually answer the question. And to be clear, there is no answer to this question that isn't, in some sense, supernatural. There needs to be something that could create matter that isn't actually composed of matter.
Yeah, that is the very so the materialists are allergic to this word supernatural, and also supernatural gets used in certain different ways, or supranatural, or XYZ. Supernatural just means like above nature, beyond nature, right? So before nature, this if you understand, which is true, unless you believe in some sort of infinite universe, which is there's arguments against that, right? Tristan, what would you say to somebody that believes that the universe has just always been?
Well, I don't think that's actually a reasonable answer to the question, because it's effectively just a Socratic lobbing off of the issue. Um, even though the argument that a universe has always been there, you still need to have some sort of answer of how it actually began. Something can't actually come from nothing. There is still a reasonable. We can measure this point of when something was not there and when it was there, and something needs a rationale for why it was created to begin with, even if we account for the fact that like material perceptions of time or something didn't actually exist at the time. It still needed to actually be created in order for everything to affect afterwards.
Yeah. And the Voluspo explains this, it's its first book in the Poetic Edda, right? So I'm actually going to read this here. This is, this is the creation myth here. It says, and this is, Tristan, what translation is this? You know?
Not offhandedly.
But it says, of old was the age when Ymir lived. Sea nor cool waves nor sand there were. Earth had not been nor heaven above, but a yawning gap, and grass was nowhere. Then Bur's sons lifted the level land. Midgard with the mighty, there they made. The sun from the south warmed the stones of earth, and green was the ground with growing leeks. The sun, the sister of the moon from the south, her right hand cast over heaven's rim. No knowledge she had where her home should be. The moon knew not what might was his. The stars knew not where their stations were. So it's pretty much saying like, there was nothing, and this was built, and this was created, and the stars and the sun and everything didn't even know their place until they came to be.
Yeah, so effectively, from what we understand here, is that all of these are what we would recognize as being physical matter, actual things that tangibly exist in our universe. Like, you can go theoretically to the sun and touch it. It's a physical thing, right? The ground, the earth, the waters, all these things are physical things that exist in reality. So from this, we have to understand that before, or at least the Voluspa recognizes that before these things were created, the gods actually had formed them. That means the gods exist in a realm in which it is not based on physical matter. They don't literally live on dirt and rocks and stuff like we do. They probably have some sort of maybe some sort of idealist manifestation of rocks or matter or some sorts that is like that in their realm, but is probably a realm of the mind and that sort of thing. It's not actually our physical universe, or at least our physical state of matter. I should note here that this is different from the conception that the gods do not exist within creation itself, because they still exist within the same quote unquote universe that we exist in. They still exist within the same mental structure as we do. It's just that they are still immanent in creation. It's just that they're not physical material beings.
So, somebody that is a transcendentalist will say that they create this duality, that immanence, like immanentialism, is materialism, and that they are the only ones that have an option that contains like the metaphysical. What do you think about this duality they create there, Tristan?
Yeah, I mean, that's just on the basis of it is completely untrue. The idea that there is a duality between materialism and immaterialism in the sense of the physical and the mental spheres, which goes back to like Platonism, or not Neoplatonism as many people understand, but like originally the philosophy of Plato. Note here, Plato was not a Neoplatonist, but I know it's kind of confusing.
Yeah.
But when we get it here that the types of materialism and immaterialism are different from transcendentalism, because in transcendentalism, God exists outside of the entire structure of the universe entirely, all of creation. So he's not beholden to any sort of laws. He's not beholden to logic or rationality or anything. God can create a square circle because neither of these concepts have any sort of beholdenness to him. Which is not the case for our deities. Our deities are very much beings beholden to the laws, literally the orlog of the universe, right? They're under a sort of constant universal law that we are ourselves beholden to.
So we got a good question in the chat. Real quick, I want to point out we got a very generous donation from my buddy Zimzilla99, who does really cool kaiju content. So if you guys like Godzilla and King Kong and stuff like that, go check them out. $9.99 from our boy Zimzilla. Thank you so much, Mr. Zim. Every dollar helps. And guys, if you guys want to send a super chat to us during this live stream, that's very, very helpful, because this time around with the BOG, we want to upgrade our production value. So if you guys want to see the BOG get these guys some fresh mics, get some new stuff, send in some super chats if you would like to. So we got a good question here in the chat, Mr. Tristan, before we go on. Caesar says, so the gods didn't exist before creation?
I think that depends on what exactly you mean by creation. There's the creation of the material universe, which is what the Voluspo was just speaking about. The gods still existed before that. They are the ones that actually ordered the universe. As I said, the sons of Bur in this, Bur's sons are actually Odin and his brothers Vili and Ve. So they still existed before the creation of the material universe, but there was a time before the existence of the gods in which they did not exist. That is correct.
Yeah. And what a transcendentalist will argue, whether it be somebody that's a Christian or a Neoplatonist, or perhaps certain sects of Hinduism or whatever, that there was something, that there is an external deity, right? There's something that exists beyond immanent reality. And let's nail down the definition here. Immanence does not mean material reality. Immanence is all of existence, meaning all of the realms of existence, whether they be material, immaterial, or other, right? I know it's hard to fathom something that is other than that duality, but if we accept the premise of plurality, of existential plurality, which we do, and reject the idea of singularity, then we have to kind of come to this idea that there could possibly be something other than material or immaterial, even though we cannot fathom it, right? So that's a whole other tangent. But what they believe is that there is a being outside of existence. And what an immanentialist argues is that nothing, if it's outside of existence, then it can't exist. Right, Tristan?
Yeah, that's more or less accurate.
So, and it's actually a pretty, pretty logical argument. Then how does something exist if it's outside of existence? If it's not within existence, how does it exist? You know what I mean? So what happens is the transcendentalists create all of these kinds of, really abstract, because what they're saying is what is outside of existence purely is an abstraction. It's just an abstraction. How it has no thingness. They will argue, Neoplatonists will argue that it is this great oneness, right? That all things is this great oneness. Well, how it's unknowable. It's this unknowable oneness outside of existence. How do you even how am I supposed to believe that, right? If it is great oneness that is unfathomable and unknowable, how do you know it and how do you fathom it? And if it's outside of its existence, how does it exist? And if it is all things, then how is it a thing? Because if it is everything, then it has no thingness.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's I would even say that trying to criticize the idea as you are there is actually going a bit too far, Dave, because the concept that there is something that exists outside of existence is on the face of it so laughably ridiculous and illogical that it does not actually require any sort of answer. It's basically just them saying that their religion doesn't actually make sense. So actually their religion doesn't have to make sense. That's basically what they're saying. It's just a cop-out.
Yeah. So is there anything else to be said for the cosmological argument?
I would like to note here that there is an issue in the cosmological argument because generally speaking, when people posit it, they're talking about a sort of monistic or a monotheistic deity. So, like as we would think of it as like the Christian God, right? That's generally what people imagine when they're thinking of the cosmological argument. So God can create the first speck of matter and then do the Big Bang and then it's answered, right? But this doesn't quite work in the same way as in the Germanic position, because you can also just bring up the position of, okay, so what happened before, Odin, right? Like you can keep moving the prime material backwards from the gods and it keeps going. Sorry. So the answer to this is actually something that, and it's going to be kind of a bit of a hot take, a little controversial here, and we're probably going to need to discuss this in depth in some other episode, but the prime material option here is actually Gununga Gap itself. That everything that ever was traces its origin back to Gununga Gap. And Gununga Gap, the actual origin and the meaning and the what it actually is relevant from its actual linguistic elements here. Gin means holy, and gap is like a big open space. So it could be conceptually translated as like a great holy emptiness. And so everything that has ever been formed in Gununga Gap from the mixture of Muspelheim and Niflheim. Muspelheim represents entropy or negentropy, Muspelheim represents entropy, and negentropy I'm sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied here. Niflheim represents negentropy and Muspelheim represents entropy. So what's going on here is that because something can either exist or not exist, it is either changeable or not changeable. It has qualities or it does not have qualia. Then between the combinations of these things, any sort of intermixing of them, from them, all things are possible. Everything that has ever existed or conceptually can ever exist is some mix of these elements in different manifestations, right? And so they all come about through and form in the great holy emptiness that is Gununga Gap. The difference between a Christian or a monistic, monotheistic argument is that Gununga Gap isn't a person. It's not a thing. It's not a personable entity. It's not a god. It's not a sentient being. It's just the space where creation happens.
And that which put it into motion, some could argue, is Erlog, right?
Yes, I would say that Orlog is the thing that ultimately predisposes everything to come together. Because anything that can exist must exist by the dint of the fact that it is either changeable or not changeable. It has some elements of negentropy or entropy. Entropy and negentropy, by their very nature, must exist. It's not a matter of whether it could exist or something. It is a priori necessary to the qualia of existence.
And then this answers what existed before the gods, what put the gods in motion, and that would be Erlog, right?
Right.
Erlog being the operating system of reality, the kind of the ordering forces of all existence.
Right. It's basically natural law at that point.
Mm-hmm. So, I think we pretty much covered the cosmological argument here pretty well. So that's the cosmological argument for existence and the gods existing, right? If we look at, we use the cosmological argument, well, we know that, things just didn't, poof and, I guess they did sort of poof into existence, but the cosmological argument explains how things came to be, and it's part of how we explain the gods and reality. So we move on to what is called the teleological argument.
Right. So the teleological argument for a deity's existence is that the world exhibits an intelligent purpose based on experience from nature, such as its order, unity, coherency, design, and complexity. And hence, there must be an intelligent designer to account for the observed intelligent purpose and order that we can observe. That is, the world functions on a sort of mechanistic principle that fits wholly together in a logically ordered and coherent way that not only gives rise to us and other life, but allows for the creation of anything at all. This is basically natural law, right? Like the mechanisms and setup of the universe exists as such to allow the formation of physics and gravity and matter and life and chemicals and biology and human beings, right?
Yeah. And if you look at creation, if you look at reality as a whole, there's actually quite a bit of, I hate justifying with science, but there are quite a few scientists that have come to that there is a governing, deciding factor in reality, that they obviously, many of them, they don't say necessarily it is divinity, but they sort of go into, then we start getting into things like simulation theory and like all this kind of like weird, they go all these different ways to try to just avoid religion, right? Because because at the end of the day, libertinism must oppose this, because if you come to the realization that there must be divinity, that means that you are at the bottom. Man is at the bottom of the hierarchy, not the bottom of the hierarchy, but man exists within a hierarchy, and then there is something above him that he must obey its commands. And this is like monstrous to like self-worshiping libertines.
It all basically boils down to some like absolute primitive ape brain saying "fuck you, dad." They don't want to have like this over cosmic daddy that can tell them what to do.
Yeah.
An interesting thing about this, though, is when you have these people who actually work within the different scientific fields, who study things like molecules, they study biology, everything at a large scale to the microscopic scale and even further down. Not all of them, but a lot of them tend to develop more theistic worldviews because they cannot make sense of the universe unless there is someone or something in charge of the absolute complexity that they see.
Mhm.
Because even at the molecular level, if you follow the scientific standards, everything makes sense while simultaneously it shouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
Molecules and atoms, they do not make sense, yet they still do. They shouldn't operate the way that they do, and yet they still do. And there is very little explanation that people can actually have to explain what is even going on. So a lot of them ended up just throwing up their hands and just going, well, there must be someone in charge of this because this doesn't make any other sense.
It can all be conceptually taken back to the famous quote by Werner Heisenberg, who was a Nobel Prize winning physicist, and he said, "The first gulp from the glass of natural sciences will turn you into an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you."
Mm. Mm. And it's true too. It's, you know, when you first start looking into, you know, here's the problem is that atheism is for literal midwits. Scientism is for midwits, and they get stuck there because they're not really, they're smart enough to question things and to read very face value things, and but they are not smart enough or brave enough to go deeper and to understand that reality is. This is where their cult gets in the way. This is where their dogma gets in the way. They're smart enough to understand this very simplistic dogma, but then they can't go further and look at, well, this reality has an intelligence to it. There is an intelligent guiding factor to reality. You cannot escape this. There's no such thing as pure random chance. There's no such thing. If there was, if everything was just kind of the way that materialists believe it to be, there would be no human beings. There would be no sense to reality. Reality would just be completely nuts.
Right. If it was the situation that atheists posit, that we exist in a cold, mechanistic universe that doesn't care for humanity, then there is no good reason that any of the natural laws would happen to align in such a way that it would produce life and humanity to begin with. It is so, because of course, natural laws could have been anything, right? Like any mechanistic or mathematical constant in existence ever perceivable. It could have been any of these things. It's literally an infinitude of wrong answers it could have possibly have been. The idea that it gave rise to the single correct answer that actually could have produced us is so statistically implausible that it actually borders on laughably absurd to suggest that this wasn't intelligently designed.
There are some. Now there are some schools here of thought regarding like different aspects of science, like the creation of the universe, and even the subatomic worlds. And when they're talking about things like the natural laws and everything, is that the natural laws should not necessarily be viewed as something that was going to happen ultimately, no matter what. But instead, these natural laws that we are currently operating on in this universe, they are more of an anomaly. Again, like with the subatomic level, things shouldn't work, but they do, as well as the natural laws that we are familiar with. There are some that believe that that is more or less an anomaly. That shouldn't have happened, and yet they did regardless.
Yeah, there's no good reason that natural laws should be the way that they are. There's no facet of the universe that makes it an inevitability, and because it's not an inevitability, it probably shouldn't have ever happened.
And not just an anomaly. Andre says an anomaly, but I think that sells it short. We're talking about many millions and millions of anomalies that happen one after another to come to where we are today.
Yeah, I mean, it would be like shrinking down $1 billion to the size of a grain of sand and then putting it somewhere on one of the beaches of Earth, and then you immediately go on vacation and stub your toe on it and pick it up, and now you're a billionaire. This would actually be more likely than the natural laws actually coming together to form the life and biology that we understand just by random chance, by an infinitude of magnitude. Like you could put this to like the 100th power, and it would still be significantly more likely.
And also with the materialism is they have to come to terms with what there's like many things that they just can't explain, right? They just cannot explain. One of them is like the hard problem of consciousness. Tristan, are you familiar, or Andre, you guys familiar with hard problem of consciousness?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
So go ahead.
No, I was going to say I'm actually not familiar.
So hard problem of consciousness is effectively, well, if we are just purely, meat machines, if we're just meat machines that operate on, bioelectrical algorithms that predetermine all of our behaviors, and that everything was created by chance and blah 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 blah. If that's truly our nature, then how do you? And there's nothing metaphysical. Which, by the way, they believe in metaphysical things. The libertine is like so terminally is so terminally wrong about these things and just hypocritical, really. They will believe one thing one way and then believe something the opposite way. It's just this nutty schizo. It makes no sense. There's nothing coherent about their worldview. So they'll tell you, well, there's nothing metaphysical. Metaphysics doesn't exist. Well, they believe in tons of metaphysical concepts and ideals, right? They believe in things like freedom and justice and blah blah blah. And then they'll say, oh well, that's a social construct or whatever. Well, so are these metaphysical ideals that you guys believe in and supposedly hold higher than everything else, equality, et cetera, et cetera. These are metaphysical things. And then on top of it, they believe in this kind of strange essentialism that goes with this metaphysical essentialism to the human nature, that you are not necessarily governed by the biological realities of who you are. You can be a boy or a girl, and you can be a this, and you can be a that, and blah blah blah. And your physical, material, your biological realities don't determine anything. It's all this kind of metaphysical essence. So they say all of these kinds of things, and then will turn and reject metaphysics. It's completely bizarre.
Well, I mean, it's completely incoherent is what it is. It's people who have an ideological belief in something, but as is often the case, these people have no actual education in philosophy whatsoever, which is, as you mentioned earlier, is something I like to harp on, is the perniciousness of liberalism, is that these people don't actually understand the things that they believe. They just accept it as the default correct choice because that's what everyone believes. They don't recognize that their beliefs are coherent because they don't understand what their beliefs actually even are.
So, yeah, exactly. And then they'll go and say, they require evidence and require empiricism and require all this kind of stuff. But then when it goes against them, for example, the hard problem of consciousness. The hard problem of consciousness is that there's a mountain of evidence that shows that consciousness exists outside of our just material being. There's just so many studies. For example, go look up things like shared dreams. This is one of the biggest problems that they have. Shared dreams is a thing. They can prove it. You cannot disprove shared dreams.
Well, that's a little different from the hard problem of consciousness. That's more like the proof for the immateriality of consciousness. The hard problem of consciousness is the idea of why humans have any sort of actual internal qualia to begin with. Like, we're used to thinking of evolution in terms of like a giraffe has a long neck so that it can eat the leaves on the top of the tree, right? Like, it's mechanistic. Everyone understands that something evolves in such a way because it benefits them. Except the ability to have a qualia, an internal self that is actually fully conscious, doesn't have a sort of natural benefit to it. Like, there is no natural benefit in evolution or biology to the ability for you to sit here and wonder about what is the meaning of life. Are you a good person? Maybe I should kill myself because there's no point, right? Like, the problems of consciousness that we have to deal with as actual people have no natural predicate. There's no reason something should have evolved this in order to become a more efficient whatever you are.
Someone once pointed out that evolutionarily speaking, the ability for humans to think of themselves and start to think about bigger concepts like philosophy has been an outright detriment, evolutionarily speaking, because it makes people doubt themselves and makes people kill themselves.
Exactly. Like, none of this stuff has a sort of natural benefit to it. If anything, a lot of it is actually detrimental to you, and we've still all almost universally evolved it for some reason anyhow, with the idea being that the only possible explanation for this is that either there's some hidden element to consciousness that actually benefits us, which is probably not the case because we see otherwise existing animals which exist perfectly fine and do not appear to be conscious, or that something is special about humans entirely, that we were given this outside of the realm of nature, that it wasn't evolved We were given this because we are meant to have it.
It makes absolutely no sense that something like this would evolve by itself. It's a strange concept that this would be of any sort of evolutionary advantage, and usually, if it's not advantageous, we get rid of it. So down the line somewhere. But we have reinforced this, and we have gotten progressively more and more complex and advanced in the methods that we, I guess, express our sentiency in such a way that for instance, the appreciation of arts, writing, music, so forth. Like, it's really hard to try and explain that from a purely biological perspective. So, as you said, there must be something entirely different at play here, and we are obviously very different from a lot of other animals in the way that we express ourselves.
Yeah. In fact, animals aren't conscious. Animals are not like us. We are the only creature. If humans were not supposed to have consciousness, then why is it that other species don't actually have language? So they have ways that they communicate, especially intelligent creatures like dolphins or what apes and so forth. These creatures are very, very intelligent, and they have very complex forms of communication, but they don't actually have language. They can't actually conjure concepts. They don't have inner monologue. They can't create art, right? They can't do these things. Somebody will say, look at this elephant. He could pick up a paintbrush, and he's just, he's just kind of like being trained. There's no real concept to that.
The elephant says, what do you mean? I've already eaten breakfast this morning.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, most human beings don't have this either. Only certain human beings have this. But when we're talking about the hard problem of consciousness, as these guys said, it is not to our reproductive interests that we have philosophies and different evolving socioeconomic structures. And by all means, and you know what? We could make a naturalistic argument against many philosophical ideas and political ideas. For example, feminism. Dude, feminism is like dropping you. A society would be better off if you dropped a nuke on them or gave them the bubonic plague than giving them feminism. Feminism is a purely abstract ideology that you could see the moment a society accepts feminism, their birth rates collapse. It is worse than a disease. So why is it that there's no good reason, there's no benefit to conjuring up feminism, but society still accept it? This is evidence that we have this ability to do this, and there's no like naturalistic or scientific way to justify it, because it goes completely against our reproductive interests, which are like one of the most what is the most natural truth of all living organisms.
I'm not entirely sure I'd agree with that, Dave, because especially in the case of feminism, I think you could probably make a naturalistic argument for the adoption of feminism based on the quote unquote, and this is actually what it's called, guys. I'm not being crass. It's called the sneaky fucker theory. The idea basically that instead of being the supreme Chad alpha male who gets all like the chicks, a mating strategy is based on sort of like bribing women or like smuggling yourself into the mating structure somewhere so that you get to mate and then flee. So the idea being that you accept feminism, even though it would be disastrous for social consequences in society in general, as long as like you get the pity fuck out of it by saying, yeah, feminism is true, and then the feminist sleeps with you, then you've still won. It rewards accepting feminism.
But that's not evidence that that's actually like, not that the movement itself is not detrimental. That is just a further adaptation and reaction of the opposite gender upon the ideology to actually turn it to an advantage.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but of course feminism is reasonable to adopt for women because it's basically just women get to do whatever they want with no rules. So like there's a reason they would adopt this, naturally speaking. Women should normally be in a natural setting would be constrained by men. And so you get this situation in which women accept this, and because men aren't actually taking reproduction from women by force, you have to accept a consent-based form of this. It allows for the steady adoption of feminism by women who basically say, well, if you're not a feminist, I won't sleep with you. So then they say, oh yeah, I'm a feminist. And then, as every man knows, you're really not a feminist. You're just going to say that.
But my point is that feminism is, I guess, on the individual. Yeah, no, I would agree with Andre that it's not necessarily it's kind of like a reactionary adaptation to something in order to maintain like to like maintain your individual reproductive interest, right? It's not beneficial to an entire species, or it's not beneficial to a society, right?
Right, it's definitely not beneficial to the society, but people interact in society as individuals, right? Like the evolutionary approach of how things work in natural selection is based on you as an individual.
I think that's a very modern line of thinking, because there is a term with, I don't forget that exactly the term, but there is a term within biology where a certain group of animals actually actively help each other succeed in society, and not just selfishly try to reproduce and one up the others, because there is an advantage in working together. And humans seem to show a lot of signs of wanting to work together to make a stable society, rather than just trying to one up each other at any given moment.
That's not entirely wrong there, that there is an evolutionary benefit to cooperation in that sense, especially you can break it down between universal cooperation and tribalistic cooperation. Both are actually incredibly beneficial. Universal cooperation is only slightly less good than tribal cooperation, and thus tribal cooperation tends to beat it out. But the reason this sort of individualist approach has come about and hasn't been exterminated or was never adopted to begin with is because the process of selfish, I guess we call it the selfish gene in this instance, it takes time over society to expunge it from the gene pool. So, and this is more or less what we're seeing too in modern societies in which that have taken this up, is that they are getting noticeably less fertile. They're less likely to breed. It might work occasionally, but it's not enough to actually make up for the detriments of the ideology itself. The meme is itself poisonous. It's just going to take a long time to kill the host.
Yeah. So, and I believe, Andre, the term you're looking for is reproductive group strategy or something like that, I think.
Yeah, so it's something like a reproductive altruism, or something along those lines.
Yeah. So, moving on, another, before we go off the rails too far, long story short is that there is no, I guess you could say, what would be there's no mechanistic, there's no just purely material argument for consciousness. Materialism cannot explain consciousness. We have consciousness, not just empirically. We could prove consciousness. We could look, there's all this evidence for it, and there's no good reason for us to have it. And in fact, it goes against this idea of like evolutionary biology and everything like that. So the only explanation is that we were given this, that this was a gift. And we already knew this, right? Science comes to all these conclusions that we already knew. That's already like in the Edda, right? We were given this. We were given our odor. We were given our und. We were given consciousness. It was given to us. And we could see that in reality and in history and in the trajectory of reality itself. So now that we've established, right, that creation happened, something must have created it, that we have that reality must have an intelligent governing hand in the outcomes, right? This must be the case. So we've proven that God, divinity exists. It must exist. To not believe it is just like pretty dumb. So then we have to go to the argument for why heathenry is the correct worldview, why heathenry is the correct religion, why our understanding of these things is the right one, and how do we come to from those truths to accepting the heathen religion, right? Because a lot of people are going to argue that, oh, well, there's all these other religions, and then new religions came about, and this religion, that religion, blah, blah, blah. And we're going to start this out by one of, I a lot of times make the argument of Pascal's wager, right? I actually didn't even know this was Pascal's wager, Tristan. I'll be completely honest with you. It's just some like series of logic I came up with to like explain it. And then,
oh, really? Because you hit it so perfectly. I assumed you had looked it up and we're talking about like, yeah, Pascal's wager. That's what I'm going to do.
No, I made that up. there's so many things that I think that are original ideas that I came up with, and people are like, no, that's already a thing.
Yeah, that's like, already Dave's loop-de-loo. I'm sorry.
Damn, if I was around 500 years ago, I would have been like a genius. But now I'm just like, fuck. I'm just coming to these damn conclusions. But anyway, but the fact that I did come to this conclusion is, in my opinion, shows that it's at least a worthwhile argument to look at. So Pascal's wager. So I'm just going to make the argument to you guys, and real quick, we're going to take a look at a super chat here before we move on. We have our boy Niels Ebson says, for $20, thank you, Mr. Niels. He says, a little donation and a thought. I don't think a man can reason his way to faith. I think it is arrived at through experience, prayer and offerings through experience. Prayers and offerings to the gods bear fruit, and that's really the end of it. I like that. I would agree with you, Niels, to a certain extent. Here at the end of the day, faith is galvanized, is solidified through experience. Once you have that truly spiritual experience, it seals it, and everybody has to do it, right? Everybody has to eventually have that experience, that spiritual experience, to justify to themselves. Now, that's not just what it's about, but let's be real here. You could say that, well, that's, I'm sure Tristan will argue that you should do it just because it's good and it's command from our ancestors, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, we have to come to terms with this. As modernists, we need this justification for ourselves to really have faith. So the problem, Mr. Niels, is that in order to get people to get our folk to actually practice and to want that experience, we have to make these logical justifications. It's just the way that it is. They have to come to the idea that, okay, I know this is true. I know this is good. Now I have to experience it. In order to get just to that, we have to make a bunch of arguments. But at face value, I 1000% agree with the thrust behind what you're saying here. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, I would argue that ultimately everything that we think we know must be arrived at through what is effectively a leap of faith. And so faith is ultimately the standard for any sort of decision that we make for anything. Though I do think once we accept this, a certain leap of faith, we are capable of reasoning our way to religious faith through that. But yes, ultimately you do need to just accept that this is true, and then there's no way I can teach you to be religiously faithful. It's sort of a prerequisite, a predicate. Though I would say that this is especially difficult for modern people, especially coming from an atheistic background. I think it's perfectly reasonable that, as Dave mentioned earlier in the show, as long as you can sort of LARP and pretend your way to doing it, so as long as you can say, basically, I'm going to do this because the book says so, even though I don't actually understand why, or I don't even actually believe in the book. As long as you can actually keep doing that and then give to your children what is effectively a real faith, that they grow up and they actually do have this faith, then it's all worked out for the benefit. And a lot of people in modernity are going to need to eventually come to terms with the fact that they just need to grin and bear it and just accept that, yeah, I might not understand or truly believe in the gods, but I'm going to do whatever the religion says and then give my children what is effectively an orthodox, uncorrupted faith.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. it's perfectly fine to fake it till you make it. In fact, it's good to fake it till you make it, because let me tell you guys something. So this last year at FSH, Mr. Mike Saginario, leader of the Ermine folk, he built a absolutely just, it was a beautiful effigy. I'm not sure if you guys saw it, but it's almost life-sized, a replica of a Thor statue from back in the day, and it was gilded in gold. This thing was magnificent. Like when I first saw it, I like started, like tears were coming. I was just, this thing is just, you see it in the sunlight, and it just, this shines with splendor, and it was just, man, incredible. This effigy. And we did, it was the biggest bloat I've ever attended. There, I don't know how many people there, 100, 200. There were so many people there that my son wanted to make an offering. He won a big piece of chocolate. He did. So one of the events is there they do a kid's hammer throw, right? And each, there's like brackets of ages, and the kids come up and they throw the hammer as far as they can. Well, to brag a little bit, my clan usually wins most of the age brackets. We have some strong kids. We got some big kids, right? My middle son, he's kind of like a lanky guy. He's he's not a. My oldest son is a big, meaty, strong kid, and my middle son is a really lanky kind of guy, right? He's gonna be a really tall guy, but he's he's going to be getting the girls when he gets older. He's going to be one of those tall, skinny guys that has the big Adam's apple and like knows how to get his Mac on. He's already there. But because of this, he never really wins nothing. He gets overshadowed by the bigger, stronger kids. So this year was the first year that he won, right? He was pumped. He could not believe that he won. You should have seen his reaction when everybody called his name and everybody clapped. It was like his time to shine. And what he did was he said, we did our bloat, and it was to the Thunderer because we had the effigy. And he said, Daddy, I want to give my prize, half of my prize to Thor. So what I'm getting at is the circle around this bloat was so big that it like took like an entire minute to walk around all of the people and walk them over to the offering. Mike builds this like gigantic, he builds a ship, like a 6-7 foot ship to burn with all the offerings on. So my son he offered his chocolate to the Thunderer, and we go back. So during this bloat, we performed, I believe it's called the Smyrna rite. It's the rite of the living idol. It's in all Indo-European religions. And what you do is you welcome the deity to inhabit the vessel, to inhabit the effigy. So they're like, it gives life to the effigy, creates a living idol. And during this, right, and we followed the ritual that the Neurona Society reconstructed from their work, and this was incredible. What happened was, and FSH, when we do the bloats at FSH, there's usually some sort of supernatural phenomenon that happens. This was something that I could not believe my eyes. I've had many wonderful spiritual experiences in my life. This was something that was like so big and so incredible. I almost didn't believe it. And like 200 people saw it. So he's doing the Smyrna rite. Underneath the effigy is a very large candle, not like a little bath. There's a very large candle with a big flame, something that it has to be like a hurricane to blow this thing out. It's a big, thick, inch wide wick. It's a big flame. So he's got this candle underneath the effigy, and he goes through the rites, and he, does the 9 herbs and says all the things, and went through. It was a beautiful ceremony. And the moment that he says, I welcome Thor to whatever he said in when he's like closing up and doing the welcoming of the Thunderer to the ritual, there was this wind. It was completely still. This wind that came out of nowhere, and the big ass candle underneath the effigy blew out, and this like 10-foot, 12-foot cyclone of like of embers just forms around the fire. It was so unbelievable. Literally a tornado of embers. And I'm not making this up. Hundreds of people can verify that they saw this. It was, it's just this chill went down my spine. You just knew you were in the presence of the divine. This was like, I guess you could call this a miracle. I almost did not believe it. I thought I was looking it. And it was not just like it was unbelievable to see. It was unfathomable to see. I'm like getting goosebumps talking about it. This cyclone of fire embers forms before us. There is no natural explanation for how this happened. Cyclones of embers don't just form out of nowhere during a still evening. That just does not happen. It blows out the fire. This thing forms, and I'm thinking, I felt like I was looking at some sort of like effects from a Disney movie or something like that. It was completely magical. And this happened, and you just heard like, oh, and I remember I saw this and it went down, and I just like looked around at everybody, and their eyes were just popping out of their heads. It was just, people were like holding their hands tight. Like, it was just blew everybody's minds that this happened. And after it was over, the bloat was over, people were coming up and kneeling before the effigy and crying. People were crying and kneeling before the effigy. We saw the divine. We saw it. It's there. And for so many people, this was the point where they made their leap of faith. They made their leap of faith. And there are so many people that came to the event because they watched the BOG and they follow us on Telegram and on social media and stuff. And there are people that came up, like, thanked me and hugged me for introducing to them to this and harassing them to come to this event. And that it was like, they said, I am now a believer. I now believe. So this is the type of stuff that can and will happen eventually, but you must have the momentum to make the leap of faith and fake it until you make it, because it is real. It will happen, and it will change your life forever, forever, forever. The gods are real. They are real. They do hear us. They know us. This is the faith. This is the faith of our people. So, going into, let's take a step back to the show here. Pascal's wager, for those of you that are still kind of on the fence. And Tristan's probably going to rip this apart. But here's my Pascal's wager argument. Firstly, for why heathenry is the right one. First of all, heathenry is one of the most accurate of the Indo-European traditions. It is the one that evolved the way it was supposed to evolve. And it got kind of frozen in time, like unadulterated. It didn't get messed up. It didn't get poisoned by modernity or whatever. Some people can make arguments that certain texts were contaminated by Christianity, and some may be, but we can literally demonstrate through academic processes that it is indeed an authentic heathen document that is not contaminated. We can prove this, and we have proved this, but that this is the faith for us. Right. This is for us. It's always been for us. And many of the other kind of branches of Western Indo-European religion have either been lost, have been heavily contaminated. There's not enough evidence to build it in a living way. So heathenry is the strong horse. So if you're going to accept a Western branch of Indo-European tradition, heathenry is the strongest one. Right? It is the one with the most believers. It is the one with the most infrastructure. It has the most evidence. It has the most everything. And because of that, this is the one that the gods wanted us to coalesce around. So Pascal's wager, right? You have two options: to be a heathen or to not be a heathen. If you are not a heathen, then you could possibly run into this problem of when you go to the afterlife, you get punished, right? You say you do everything wrong, you blaspheme, you're a materialist, you just go along with modernity because you can't come to faith, or you can't cook up faith, or whatever reason you don't believe in faith, or whatever, you're too fucking smart for that, or whatever. and you run into the idea of, in the afterlife, it doesn't go too well for you. Well, the other option is that you are a heathen and you live the life as best as possible. And when you go into the afterlife, all's good. Which one is the better outcome? Obviously, even if you don't believe in an afterlife, there could be an afterlife. And if you go there, it could be pretty bad if you don't do things right. So it's better to just be a heathen and believe it and live it, so that just in case there is an afterlife, and just in case the gods are real, and just in case we are right, which I think we are, but just in case we are right, that you don't end up with a really bad conclusion. So what do you think about that, Tristan?
Well, I would definitely say that the primary issue with the Pascal's wager argument you have here is that it falls apart when you start comparing it to other religions that might also be true. Like, generally speaking, Pascal's wager was constructed in a time and place in which people were thinking Christianity was the only other option. It was either atheism or Christianity. Whereas if you had introduced other religions, it kind of falls apart. So, for instance, you're correct in saying that the atheist has nothing to look forward to, even if they are right. But if they're wrong, they face a tremendous punishment. But if you pick the wrong religion, you may also face a tremendous punishment. Like, if you're a Christian and also it turns out that Odin is real, then you might be like really messed up, right? But even more specifically, if you're say a heathen and it turns out that Allah is actually the true God, then you're going to be really fucked up. And you might actually even be more messed up by choosing to believe in a religion contrary to the real religion than you did in picking no religion whatsoever, depending on the god and how they actually adjudicate that. Though, funnily enough, I do think it's actually the circumstances of belief here make it more rational for you to pick some other religion than to pick no religion at all things being equal. That is still the case. That I do think that is actually accurate in your Pascal's wager argument.
So real quick, I believe was that A? Was that for Australian? Skaven Scribe. Skaven. This guy's a Warhammer fan, I think. So, $20 Australian from Skaven Scribe. Thank you so much for your generosity, sir. So, I knew this was going to come up. So here, let's bring this up here. Metal Production Tips says that's a Christian argument. Yeah, it is a Christian argument.
I mean, I wouldn't even say it is a Christian argument. It's an argument that was originally formulated by a Christian, but it's not necessarily inherently a Christian argument.
So, what? So let's say that it's a heathen argument, and that's why I prefaced it with, "This is why heathenry is correct, and why you should go with heathenry." And if you're not a heathen, then you run into some issues. Mr. Metal Production Tips, which, by the way, I got to check out your channel if you're metal production, because I'm a metalhead myself, and I do production, so I'm going to check out your channel. So, why is it a Christian argument? You know what I mean? As Tristan said, it was created by Christians for Christianity, but it can be used for any religion, right? It can be used for any religion.
You could use it to explain why you should believe in Shango of the Yoruba. I mean, it could be anything.
So I would argue that I preface it with saying that heathenry is the correct religion, and we have to go into the Pascal's wager as heathens, right? So I think the Pascal wager also applies to heathenry versus other religions. So we know that Indo-European religion is the oldest one. We know that it is the one that can be connected through study to all of the other religions that made up most of the world for the overwhelming majority of history. And we know that heathenry in the West is the one that was for us, right? And you could make the argument, well, I could be a Celtic pagan, I could be Religio Romana, right? And I think that if you are patrilineally Italian, you should be Religio Romana. You could say, well, I want to do Baltic, I want to do Slavic, I want to do Ramuva or many of the other. I have absolutely nothing against. I think that those are beautiful things. Or Greek, right? Yeah, Hellenismos or whatever. And I think that if you are Greek, you should be Hellenismos. I think that is the argument. I think the Mediterranean ones are probably the only ones that have justification for, if you are that, you should be that. But if you are of Northern European patrilineally, the strong horse is heathenry, right? There are very few, Northern European people, and even, certain Mediterranean people that are without Germanic admixture. So if you're going to make a genetic argument, it's like you'll say, well, I'm Irish, and see, I'm Irish and Polish or whatever. How many Irishmen have zero Germanic admixture, zero Germanic ancestry? Like almost none. Everybody has at least most people have some Germanic DNA in them. So to say, oh, well, I'm Celtic, I can't be a heathen. I'm Irish, I can't be a heathen, blah, blah, blah. I would say, look at your genetics. At one point you had Germanic ancestry. It's almost impossible to have it. Germanic tribes spread throughout like all of Europe and beyond. So it's hard to say, oh, well, I'm not Scandinavian and I'm not from what is now considered to be Germany. Dude, a lot of our concepts of what countries people come from are like post World War II and definitely post World War I. These countries have been redrawn over and over and over again. What matters is like what ethnos you come from. And, there's only a few. You got Germanics, you got Celts, you got Slavs, you got, well, I guess you could say Celto-Italic, right? Those are like the main ones. And most of them have Germanic ancestry. So to say like, oh, I can't be a heathen because I'm Irish or because I'm Scottish or Welsh or whatever, Germanics were in your land. And, you have Germanic admixture. To say you can't be a heathen because of that, I think is a bad argument. Another thing I would say is that heathenry, and I've said this just like a few minutes ago, heathenry has the most evidence, has the most active practitioners, has the most believers, has the most living documents, has everything, right? We have the most of everything. We are the strong horse. What do you think, Tristan? Is that a good argument?
I mean, I do think in some respects that we are the strong horse is a very good argument. Though I would disagree with you that the argument should be based around the idea that they have Germanic heritage in some sense. And we should actually discuss this more in depth in another episode. But effectively, Indo-European society is fundamentally patriarchal. So instead of taking a modernist approach and saying like a blood quantum look at, you have some sort of genetic heritage, you're like 3% Germanic or something, and that's relevant, we should look back and say, what is your father's people? In many cases, that's going to be a situation in which they would say, well, yes, I am Celtic or I'm Slavic or something. I would say the argument here goes back to the fact that the Celtic and the Slavic religions basically don't exist anymore. And they exist in a form that's not reconstructible. There's so little amount of information about them that it would never be possible to meaningfully reconstruct them, barring some immense supernatural revelation of insight. So while that's actually the case, I think it's reasonable that they effectively jump ship to the closest kin group that is also a reasonably reconstructible religion. And there's only a couple of them here, right? Within the Indo-European sphere, the only religions that are actually reconstructible or practicable are the Germanic religion, Hellenismos, by which I would include Religio Romana, so the Greek polytheism, and also Hinduism. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Well, and by Hinduism, I should say the Dharmic faith. So by that, we should include things like Buddhism.
So metal production tips clarifies it's the old you better believe in an afterlife in case it may be true. Christians say that sort of rhetoric to passively scare people.
Yeah, you should be scared of the afterlife. The idea of damnation is not a Christian concept. It is, in fact, a wholly Indo-European concept that if you are a bad person and you do not behave in the way that the gods demand a person behaves, they will obliterate you and punish you supernaturally forever. That's not a Christian idea. That is just part of religion in general.
And I would actually argue that it is damnation is more of a pagan idea because the Jews don't believe in damnation. They believe in this kind of like, they believe in, what is that called? Sheol or whatever. It's this kind of like place where you just, I don't know. They don't.
Sheol is equivalent to the Greek conception of the Fields of Hesperides or the our conception of Helheim. It's effectively not a real damnation. It's just, it's not the most impressive, greatest afterlife ever, but it's tolerable,
But what I would argue is that the idea that you can go to a place in the underworld where you get punished is something we see. The Romans had it, the Greeks had it, the Hindus have it. Everybody had it. It's not like it's a Christian injection, right? What the Christians did is they removed the afterlife for everybody from the underworld and put it in this abstraction of heaven, where you go be with God. And the way that we see it is that you don't go to that heaven. Heaven is where the gods live. Men don't go to heaven. Men go to the underworld. And when you go to the underworld, you go to the hell thing. You are judged. First of all, you go through the big long process, the big long journey through the afterlife, through the realm of the dead, and then you face judgment. And because you can't talk, you have your filgia that represents you, right? They represent you based on your luck, your family luck, and your actions in life, and they decide whether or not you get to go into the hall of the ancestors and stay there until you get reincarnated, or you go to the Niflhel, where the snakes chew on you and torture you and eat you alive and over again until the end of time. So this idea that damnation is a Christian thing is completely false.
I would also say it even extends as far as to say that you should not fear the gods is being a Christian idea, that you should fear the gods. That is also a completely ahistorical concept. In fact, I actually have a quote here from, I don't actually have the source in front of me. I think it's from the saga of Olaf Tryggvason, but don't hold me out on that one. And it says, "There is one thing to him which the king disliked, and one which he would never bow down to heathen gods, and he set his mind firmly against all sacrifice. Olaf attended the king regularly to the temple and never went inside. He stood outside by the temple doors while the king made offerings to the gods. The king often spoke to Olaf about his conduct and urged him not to bring on himself the anger of the gods and thereby destroy the bright promise of his youth, saying, 'I beg you, therefore,' said the king, 'to honor the gods and humble yourself with all lowliness before them. Otherwise, I fear they will pour out upon you some of their terrors of their stormy and fierce anger. Such is the great peril in which you are.'"
Yeah. So every single Indo-European religion has feared the wrath of the gods. That's just the way that it is. Go read the Greek stuff. How many times does Zeus just BTFO people for like their hubris and like completely destroy them? And even like other, look at the story of Prometheus and all that. The same thing happens in just about every Indo-European religion. That damnation is a thing, punishment is a thing, and if you want to, it's not. This isn't a Christian thing. This is a religious thing, and this is something that's even more prevalent in pagan religions. So to like reject that is like completely ahistorical and like it's just like it's a new age thing. It's just like a liberal thing, really, is what it is. It's completely a liberal modern thing, and the problem is that a lot of new agey kind of a lot of what would be the word for it? I guess grifters and parasites have used the aesthetics and ideas, have taken on heathenry and paganism as in general to use it as a vessel to teach their, a lot of times very like I don't know how to, like satanic entryism for one, which is not Satanism, and Luciferianism and heathenry are not compatible. And also, their liberalism, which is, you are liberated from the command and the authority and the power of the divine. You can become a god. You don't have to worry about this. And a lot of it is just reaction. It's just more liberal, fuck you, dad. That's all it comes down to is fuck you, dad. It's the entirety of their worldview, and they put runes on it, and they call it paganism.
Yeah.
And they wrote a bunch of books, and that's it.
I always like to say it's effectively a clinical, hostile reaction to the concept of authority. Like, these people are fundamentally mentally ill. It's not a rational behavior. They have a clinical reaction to authority that they cannot subordinate themselves to a structure.
Yeah, it's it's very problematic. It's I actually would argue that it's partly genetic. I've had so many arguments with McPagans that you could just like dump evidence on them and show them where they're wrong, and they just completely reject it because I think they're just genetically, biologically ordered to be, to be like this, that they can't exist in a hierarchy. They can't exist. And you see this in so many other things as well. Like, they come up like the manosphere comes up with their male hierarchy, and they're like, oh, I'm a Sigma male is what they come up with. I'm a Sigma male. And what Sigma male is in real life is a diseased or problematic male that gets kicked out of the hierarchy. The Sigma male among wolves is the one that eats children, is the one that spreads disease, is the one that's is like sick in the head and can't go along with the pack, so they chase him out, and he goes and wanders by himself until he eventually dies alone. This is the Sigma male. The Sigma male is the rotten male, and you see this cope of libertine priors of this presupposition. I would say of this behavior, this predetermined behavior, not just in heathenry, but or in pagan or in religion or in anything across the board. Just across the board that they have this in everything. And for those, unfortunately, when most of us come into heathenry, come into folk worldview and paganism, we come into the first works, the books that are written by these terrible New Age people, these subversive people that teach this, horse shit, right? That has nothing to do with history. It's not traditional. It's not authentic. It's not real. There's no basis for it. And people learn that first, unfortunately. So for those of you out there that still might believe that damnation and all this kind of is just a Christian invention and we're sounding like Christians or whatever, get that out of your brain. Get that out of your brain. That's just like liberalism horseshit. And not only does it not exist in heathenry, it doesn't exist in social orders or political ideas that are of a traditional format across the board going back for all of time, period. All of our ancestors agree with us, and none of them agree with the New Agers, period.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think it really comes to the issue of, as we talked about in the beginning of this episode, that you're eventually going to have to just rip out the tendrils of liberalism. Like, you can't just keep being a liberal. You can't just accept that. Even if you never actually can manage to replace it with what is orthodox and true religiosity and the true beliefs, you still have to rip out the liberalism. You can't let it control you, or else you're going to spin in circles. You can't use that in the faith.
Our boy Folkish Farmer says, gives us $19.99. Thank you so much, sir. Very generous. Says, great job, guys. Glad to see the BOG back. What are y'all's thoughts on the land spirits and creation, along with the land spirits' importance to farming?
Yeah, actually, I have quite a lot to discuss about that, and we should definitely do another topic on that. I got some, Audrey knows exactly what I'm talking about here, but I've got some really wicked stories about the land baiter. I would say it's a very important element of my own personal practice. I, of course, just sacrificed to land baiter myself during Bloat. But yeah, the land baiter are incredibly important to any sort of farming or agriculture. They are effectively the overseers and protectors of not only your house, but also your fields, your all of your natural places, anything within your property, the people, the animals that live there. Once propitiated, they will give you prosperity and reproductive success and everything else that we would consider to be a prosperous, gregarious, society, healthy and thriving farm or homestead or anything of that sort.
ML Wiz gives $20. Thank you so much, Mr. Wiz. Says, good stuff. Hail to you, Mr. Wiz. Thank you so much for your generous donation. Very, very good. And there was another comment here that I wanted to bring up. Says from Will Martin writes, my buddy Will Martin says, I often say, so for reference, Will practices Hellenismos. He's a Southern guy. I believe he said he's French and Scots-Irish. I believe he says whatever. But Will Martin writes, I often say I'm not Norse, but it's also a thing of sticking to your guns. I chose Olympus. Going back on it would mean I never believed it at all. So let's clarify something real quick, Mr. Martin, is that heathenry is not Norse. Heathenry is the Indo-European branch of the Western Germanic peoples. The Norse were just those who wrote it down. For people that say it's a Viking religion, that is completely just wrong, right? It is a religion that Germanic peoples practiced for tens of thousands of years, and that's just the way that it is. It's not for the Norse. It was never frozen in that time. Vikings are cool, and we like the aesthetic, and they were, did a lot of awesome stuff, and I'm not, rejecting them or anything like that, or talking bad, but to say that it's a Norse religion is incorrect, unless you mean Norse as in just northern peoples. To just pin it on like Scandinavian peoples. Scandinavians, a lot of times when they're trying to roast Americans, will say this: well, you guys are Amerimuts, and you're not actually us, and blah 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 blah. And that's just not the case, because the Germanic peoples migrated throughout all of Europe and beyond, and to say that they have ownership of it is incorrect. An American of Germanic descent, doesn't matter what kind of descent, has as much claim to heathenry as somebody that is purebred Swedish or Norwegian or whatever. It's just the fact of the matter. It is like our religion that existed for all of time and for our people, and that's it. But so with Olympus, right? Let's say for Hellenismos, you're number one. If you became a heathen, you are not going back on Hellenismos. What you are doing is you are understanding another branch of the same deities. So Zeus, Jupiter are Odin, period. So if you come to heathenry, it's not like you're turning away from Olympus. You are now just believing in Asgard, which is the same thing, just with different language. Tristan, what would you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd pretty much agree with that. I do think that Religio Romana or Hellenismos is a perfectly valid faith. It's one of the few Indo-European religions that is reconstructible and is valid, right alongside the Germanic faith. So I wouldn't knock anyone that wants to be Hellenismos and is, has a tie to that. I would say, though, that if you are fundamentally Germanic, I think you should probably go with the Germanic faith. It would be a little weird for you to then jump to Hellenismos, in my opinion. But if you're from some other faith, like, Will Martin here says that he's French, Scots, Irish, and Italian. I mean, in my own personal opinion, you really have to get granular into what exactly that means. The Irish is obviously Celtic, but the French could be pretty much anything. You could be Norman, for instance. Normans are basically just Scandinavians. A lot of the French, the Franks themselves are a Germanic tribe or a Germanic people. So, a lot of that is also just Germanic.
And also, Ireland was settled by people from the British Isles who were Germanic, and then also conquered by the Vikings. So if you are Irish, you probably have Germanic admixture, right? So it is a hard question to answer. Which one should I go with? I would say that Hellenismos or Religio Romana are very valid positions. But also, here's the deal, is that you should just go with the one that is the strongest horse, in my opinion, and has the most people and is nearby you, just so you can practice. We have people that are I know people that are patrilineally Italian, that are like half Italian, half Pennsylvania Dutch, half German, half whatever, blah, blah, blah. And they just become heathens because, that's what's nearby and that's who they're friends with. And that's what they go with. And I think that's great. I think it's perfectly fine. I'm not, as long as you are like of Europe in general, I don't know. Just go. I just want to see you at events. I want to see you at events. I want to see you become and live the faith. And that's what it is. I do think it's a little weird. Some people that like for example, if like Mr. Martin, I'm not knocking on you. Do you? I'm not judging you. But if I were you, I would probably feel a little strange doing the Greek stuff. In my opinion, that's just my point of view. You do you though. If that's the community that's around you and is nearby and that you practice and whatever, then do that. I'm not judging you. I got love for you. Do your thing. And then there's one other, he says, one follow-up thing to it that I would like to address. He says, that sounds a bit like syncretism. I'm not able to go to that. It's not syncretism. Syncretism is when you combine elements, completely different elements from different branches and with like willy-nilly. That's syncretism. So like syncretism would be like if you are a heathen and then also a Platonist and then also have like, I don't know, freaking you worship both Odin and Jupiter and Rod and the Dagda and like that's syncretism. What I'm saying is Indo-European, like Indo-Europeanness, right? It's not even syncretism. What I'm saying is that they're the same thing, just with different language and cultural interpretation. Is what I'm saying.
I mean, I would say that it's completely irrefutable that the Indo-European pantheon is not ultimately a singular object, right? Like people get very confused about this. All the different Indo-European people branched off from the same port. So there was at some point a person who worshipped Deus Pater, and then his son worshipped someone who they started calling Botanaz. But that person knew that Botanaz was just a name for Deus Pater. There was no point in time in which he decided, I'm going to do a different religion. It's all the same religion. It's just slightly mutated and changed due to the passage of time.
Yeah. And a lot of people will make the argument, well, why don't we go back to the root, the Indo-European? I make the argument that the religion evolved in the way that it was supposed to evolve, and we should go back to the last point in which it was, and the last point in which it was intact, pick it up and go forward with it.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Mr. Andre, we haven't heard from you in a minute. What do you got something to add to all this?
Well, not really. I'm honestly entirely in agreement with you two here.
Very cool. All right. So if anybody's got any other super chats or questions, throw them in and we can bring it up. But Mr. Tristan, do you have anything that you would like to add for making an argument for how we know that the gods are real?
I think we pretty much covered everything I had written here, the teleological argument and then into Pascal's wager. So I think we pretty much covered it.
Very, very good. Very good. So we're going to give everybody a minute to send in a super chat if they or comment or whatever, if they so choose to. But we're going to begin closing it out here, guys. I don't even know what
we're coming up on 2 hours, so it was a pretty long stream, but it's the opening stream, so there we go.
It's a good one. It's a good one. If you guys like the BOG, you love the BOG, you miss the BOG, guys, keep your eyes peeled any day now. Hearthfire Radio is going to drop, and you will be able to have the BOG every single week, and many other shows from great heathen content creators that you guys.
It's almost unfair that I can't talk about who we have lined up. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. You guys are gonna be pumped when you see the lineup of who all we're gonna have on board for this thing. It's something that has never been seen before, and it's going to be the big daddy. It's going to be the media epicenter for all folkish thought and content creation, and even like entertainment and education and freaking everything. We have big dreams and visions for this thing, and it's gonna be put out there, and it's gonna be really easy to use. We're talking about having an app eventually, and like all kind of stuff. So you sign up for this subscription, and you get all of these shows. You get everything in this big package. Folkish Farmer's coming back. He's gonna be on here. You're gonna have stuff that's about theology, history, books, farming, cooking, culture, music, freaking everything. Everything that we're going to have updates about events in your guys' area, whether all over the world too, whether you live in the United States or Great Britain or beyond. It's going to be really, really good stuff. We're partnering up with really great people, the best people, the smartest guys. I can't wait till it drops, because I know you guys are just going to fall in love with it. It's going to be a beautiful thing. And I'm very, very excited. I'm very blessed. And just, I just feel great that we're going to be able to be part of it and rub elbows with so many people that we love. So it's going to be a big project. It's going to be a lot of work, but I know that you guys are going to love it. So keep your eyes peeled for Hearthfire Radio. It's coming very, very soon. And, the BOG's going to be on there. The BOGs will be back. So you guys can look forward to just a whole cacophony, a freaking cornucopia of BOG episodes for your listening pleasure. If you want to check out some other stuff, you want to check out some cool fiction that many pagans and guys that are friends of ours that are writing, guys, the Bizarchives. The Bizarchives, go to thebizarchives.com and check out some books. We got some books. I got some fresh inventory. We got a sale going on. All books in and around $10. You can't beat it. Go over there, buy books. We do shipping to the United States, continental United States. And also, if you live beyond, we got all the links. You can find our entire catalog over on Amazon and other book retailers. Great fiction. Guys, support the arts. Lots of great stuff coming. I have so many projects in the works that I tell you, Big Dave's been these last couple years. Big Dave has been working like a dog, and I have a big vision.
Dave, we got to remember to plug my work for the Imperium Press. At least the one I've already done that's out and everything.
Oh yeah, plug it. Go ahead.
Right. So everyone, in case you haven't already heard, I wrote a version of the Poetic Edda for the Imperium Press. It's the entire Poetic Edda, everything, which includes new introductions of every poetry from me, including a major introduction about the Poetic Edda itself. I've reformatted all of the different citations and everything to make them now accurate and, in some cases, give them more emphasis and describe what he's actually talking about or correct mistakes that we've come to know at this point. And it also features a new original essay called the Many Sons of Yngvi Freyr at the end of it. And this book also features a general introduction by Survive the Drive.
Yeah. Old Tom in it. Tristan's in it. It is the most comprehensive, best. It is the best version of the Edda available right now. So go over to imperiumpress.org and go buy a copy, man. It's you can, and if you sign up for the Gumroad over there, and you get my other podcast, Culture Dads, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and you also can get access to hardback copies of Imperium Press works, such as the Poetic Edda. Man, I have both a hard copy and a soft copy, and this thing is magnificent. Mike did just. Oh my God, what a treasure. It has the Old Norse right next to the English translation. You can't beat it. It is a must-have. It is a must-have for every heathen. And honestly, just everybody. If you are in this sphere at any capacity, it has to be on your bookshelf. You just can't not have it. Excellent stuff. It's totally worth it. So, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, that's what we got for this evening. So guys, buy books, check out Imperium Press, check out the Imperium Press Edda. Stay tuned for Hearthfire Radio. So much great stuff. Somebody in the chat mentions about community. Guys, we are going to be helping organize so much more community stuff. So we're gonna be working hard for you guys in all aspects. We're putting out literature. we're putting out. We're going to be doing film. I got video games coming. I got tabletop games coming. I got freaking music in the works. We're going to be doing all of the above. All of the above. We are going to, the folk are rising. We are going to take it to the machine, and we are going to win. We are going to win, and we are going to see an Odinic future, a heathen future for our children, whether the Valhalla like it or not. It's coming. So, guys, stay tuned. Keep your eyes peeled for Hearthfire and all the good stuff coming. Hails and blessings to each and every one of you, and I'll see you guys next time on the BOG.